We were all fervently fulfilling our tasks regardless of danger. Everyone, particularly the youth, thought of only two words: independence and freedom. Those two words, independence and freedom, how sacred they were. On September 23, the French army publicly provoked hostilities with the Viet Minh. Gunfire erupted throughout Saigon. My father left as a liaison with men in Group B, while I stayed with my younger siblings at Elder Phan's temple in Dachau Ward. We could hear gunfire all around. And I decided to retrieve the pistol my father had left at the temple. We agreed that, if need be, we would shoot. We were determined that the French would not arrest us. Fortunately, the French only passed by. We did not need to use the pistol. The truth is that none of us had ever held a gun, let alone fired one. Including all my subsequent years in the resistance, I still haven't learned how to shoot a gun. Several days later, the local population began evacuating from the city's center to its outskirts and the provinces. Our family evacuated to Lai Thu, where a cousin had a farm. My younger siblings remained there, while my father and we three older children joined the resistance, each of us with an assignment. My fourth and youngest brother, Nguyen Dong Hao, was very small but brave. My father dispatched him and others to Cambodia with TNT sticks for the munitions workshop recently set up to produce grenades and mines. Another brother and I left for Hong Ngu in Dong Thap province to haul food to our armed forces preparing to resist in the eastern zone. My cousins in Saigon, Hong Kong, Nong, and others also joined the resistance. My father's perfectionist anger would occasionally frighten us, but in fact, he was very gentle. After my mother passed away, my father paid much more attention to my life. He encouraged me to study, to take care of my siblings, and play sports, but he would not allow me to organize at night. But then the Viet Minh assigned me to work at Hong Ngu in logistical supply for our soldiers. My third brother, Hao, had already left for Hong Ngu, about 175 kilometers from Saigon. I would have to travel by night and alone. My father took me to the Saigon wharf. There, sampans were filling with passengers. My father asked around. He told me that my trip's first leg would take me to My Tho, where I would have to find a sampan leaving for Hong Ngu. My father worried about my traveling alone, but assignments for our country took priority. I was also worried. Up until that moment, nothing had ever required that I be so brave. Yet when I saw that my father was of mixed minds, I reassured him, saying, "There's nothing to worry about, father. I can do this." I climbed aboard the boat, which already had about 30 passengers ready to depart. They must have been local people from the 6 Delta provinces on their way back home from Saigon. Since I didn't know anyone, I sat huddled in one place and didn't sleep the whole night. Everyone disembarked at My Tho the following morning. I had never been to My Tho and didn't know whom to ask about a boat to Hong Ngu. I walked around and around in the streets, searching for the Viet Minh office. Luckily, I ran into Comrade Ha, and then later I met an old friend from Cambodia. Before long, I was on my way to Hong Ngu. I had a cousin who had been working in Hong Ngu for a while. As soon as I arrived, I learned that local resistance activists had elected him president of the Hong Ngu District Resistance Committee. I was relieved to have arrived safely. Yet problems arose with my assignment to carry dried beef to the eastern zone. The day after I left My Tho provincial capital, the French occupied the city, and then they continued on, taking Sa Dec and Chau Doc provinces. By now, the French had blocked the road to Saigon. I remained in Hong Ngu, where I worked as secretary for the local Resistance Administrative Committee. Since I was in the Hong Ngu liberated area, I participated in the first general election in independent Vietnam. By January 6, 1946, we had completed all our local preparations for the nationwide elections. The people flocked to the People's Committee office to join this great event. Then we heard airplanes. People ran about, yelling, "Airplanes! Airplanes!" Bombs exploded. The French airplanes had arrived to destroy the elections. A dozen people were killed or wounded. Nevertheless, our general elections continued that afternoon. I stayed in Hong Ngu until May 1946. By then, the French had occupied most cities and provincial capitals in southern Vietnam. Our resistance armed forces had withdrawn to the countryside, leaving only the undercover units behind in the cities. My father asked friends to guide my brother and me from Hong Ngu back to Saigon. My entire family assembled at Elder Phan's temple, but we could no longer organize openly. Many families, including my father's friends from Cambodia, were in the same situation. Friends without houses in Saigon came to live with us. During this time, we faced financial difficulties. My father had used his savings to build the Phnom Penh house, where relatives now lived. We took on every kind of paid work, even rinsing bottles at factories, to support everyone living with us in Dachau ward. I decided to take advantage of the neighborhood near Elder Phan's temple. I opened a stall to sell rice, fish sauce, and miscellaneous goods, such as duck eggs, tomatoes, onions, and garlic. Several office functionaries and engineers joined my father as porters, fetching rice and eggs from the Ong Lan Brigda market for me to sell. The atmosphere in Saigon was tense and claustrophobic. People worried about how to secure food and other necessities for their daily lives. The city throbbed with anxiety about whatever might happen, for nothing seemed clear. Perhaps whatever was coming would be dangerous, yet everyone was impatient with anticipation for whatever change might soon arrive. By the end of that year, all would be clear. Even now, my younger siblings still enjoyed telling the story of their elder sister selling tomatoes at Tan Din Market. Indeed, the best place to sell was Tan Din, which was over a kilometer from our house. My skills did not include carrying heavy baskets with a bamboo shoulder pole. After walking several dozen meters, I had to set the baskets down and switch shoulders. By the time I arrived at the market, I was soaked with sweat. A French soldier at the market collected taxes, while a French police officer following behind him scrutinized prices. One day, the friend who sold duck eggs next to me was haggling over prices with a half-French, half-Vietnamese woman. The state price was 16 cents per egg, but we had bought our eggs for more than 20 cents. We had to sell them for at least 25. The police officer managing prices intervened and forced my friend to sell several dozen eggs at the state price. My friend burst into tears. I could not restrain myself. I snapped in French at the police. This startled everyone. Even the French police and the half-French, half-Vietnamese woman were surprised. They looked at each other and left. The sisters in the market thanked me profusely. However, after that incident, the brothers and sisters in our resistance organization would no longer allow me to sell goods at Tan Din Market. By speaking French, I had blown my own cover as an underground organizer. At the end of 1946, many families with their homeland in Vietnam's northern region, Bac Ky, Tonkin, sought a way to return to Hanoi, since the French had not yet occupied our capital. However, it was not long before the nationwide resistance broke out. The fires of war leapt across the entire country. Early in 1947, the French army began using its forces for terror and suppression to reinforce its control. It ran constant scouring sweeps at night in Saigon, arresting organizers in the resistance. French troops rummaged through Elder Phan Chau Trin's temple at 13 Gallimard Street, now Nguyen Hoi Tu Street, 13 times. They arrested and tortured my father. We children felt deep love for our father. We worried about him. Each time the police arrested our father, our hatred for the French grew. By the end of 1947, my father could no longer stay in the city. He received orders from the resistance organization to leave for the mangrove swamps. I received a directive to remain behind, organize for the resistance, and tutor for money to feed my siblings. After a while, friends in the Viet Minh realized I was always at Elder Phan's temple. They pointed out that my presence there could easily expose our network. I had to slip away to another site. I made up my mind to ask an older cousin, a patriotic businessman, to tidy up his affairs, move to the temple, and live with my younger siblings. I felt such love for my younger brothers and sister, but I had no other choice. I could only drop by now and then to visit them. One time, I returned to find my youngest brother with a high fever. He was huddling under grandfather's altar. I felt beset by pity. At times, I felt I should stop and care for my younger siblings. I had to repress those feelings to continue my organizing. Work as a private tutor covered our expenses during my clandestine organizing in Saigon. I had teaching experience in mathematics with students at an exam training center and, for a while, had taught at Colette School, where the curriculum was in French. The principal was a friend, older sister No. Most of the students were the children of wealthy business owners or officials from the Saigon administration. At the end of 1946, the resistance assigned me to organize for the Association of Women for National Salvation, beginning with Neighborhood 5, the area where my family lived. Subsequently, I received an appointment to the city's Association of Women for National Salvation. Sisters organizing with me at that time were Na, Hu Bij, Dat, Han, and Tu Kiu, but I was closest to Dui Lin. She and I were the same age. Dui Lin was lively, sharp-witted, and looked younger than her years. The police arrested us both several years later, in April 1951. Dui Lin gave her age as 6 years younger, making her a teenager. The enemy fell for her ruse. In 1946, the two older sisters working with us were Bei Hu, my first mentor in the resistance and later the wife of Nguyen Van Lin, and Chin Chow. I was very fond of Bei Hu, who was gentle, upright, and caring. She made careful recommendations and went to unnecessary lengths so that I would understand important points about relating to ordinary people. She would say to the other women, Yen, that was the alias she had given me, is a student. She has just finished school and does not yet know anything. She needs your help. It is true that I participated with all the enthusiasm of youth. I wanted to add my small part to the common struggle, even though I did not know the least thing about politics. The sisters in the resistance assigned me to live with a farming family in Tan Phu Dong on the outskirts of Saigon so that I could learn about organizing among ordinary people. Every day, I swept the fallen leaves in the huge orchard, cooked the rice, boiled the water, and so on. The grandmother was head of the household. She belittled me for not knowing how to cook and tidy up the house. I decided that, working for the resistance, was not easy. However, after several months, the family, even the grandmother, began to treat me with affection. I received an introduction to Comrade Hoang Quoc Tan, who was part of a Marxist cell in Saigon. Several French communists joined the cell meetings. I borrowed books on Marxism-Leninism and read about dialectical materialism, but my understanding was fragmented. I gradually gathered some knowledge about the revolution through meetings with brothers and sisters returning to the city from the resistance zone and through my occasional trips out to the mangrove swamps for large meetings. I tried to transfer whatever I had learned to the brothers and sisters in my unit. Whenever I spoke with the students for whom I was responsible, I would bring in new points and ways of teaching, which the students welcomed. I also campaigned among my acquaintances. At that time, I would refer to Bui T. Cam, a lawyer and the wife of a famous intellectual, as older sister, using a somewhat intimate term even though she was far older. She asked me what she should do for the resistance. I said, "You and your husband can look for whatever is useful for the resistance and then do it. Don't do anything that isn't useful." Even though my response was simple, she was effusive in her thanks. "Younger sister," she said, "you so right." I realized that everyone has at least latent patriotism. Sometimes, a statement as simple as my response may reveal huge truths and be a catalyst changing a person's life. Older sister Cam subsequently joined the resistance and later held important positions. In addition to assignments mobilizing and educating the populace, my friends and I distributed propaganda leaflets and encouraged strikes to oppose the enemy's schemes and cruelty. In 1948, Comrade Ho Bak from the District Party Steering Committee came to visit me, saying the district-level comrades had evaluated my organizing as zealous and had decided to receive me into the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, now the Vietnamese Communist Party. He briefed me on the party and Ho Chi Minh as president of the state and of the party. I found this very interesting but asked for time to consider. To my thinking, party membership was for model revolutionaries prepared to sacrifice for ideals. After some time, I agreed. The two people who formally introduced me were Ho Bak and Comrade Ho Ti Kai, the wife of Comrade Ha Hoi Jop. In 1946, the Fontainebleau Conference failed. Our patient efforts to avoid war had not been successful. President Ho Chi Minh stayed on in Paris to negotiate a modus vivendi, a temporary but official, diplomatic agreement pending settlement of a dispute, in September. Nevertheless, 2 months after he returned to Hanoi, the French attacked Haiphong. President Ho's speech to the entire nation on December 19, 1946 at that crucial point expressed our people's profound aspirations and determination. "We want peace. We must make concessions. But the more concessions we make, the more the French colonizers invade. They are determined to steal our country once again. No, we will sacrifice everything. We will not tolerate the loss of our country. We will not be slaves." In Saigon, the resistance movement under the People's Committee and party leadership burst forth across all the social strata. The leadership assigned me to take charge of political training for core student groups in addition to mobilizing women. Among those students was Binh Thanh, an excellent activist from the Marie Curie School. We bonded immediately and became close friends. Later, during my diplomatic missions, Binh Thanh served as my personal assistant and secretary. In addition to our organizing among workers and small traders, Duy Lien and I received assignments to mobilize bourgeois intellectual women. For me, this was difficult because these women were accustomed to a casual, free lifestyle. They could not easily adjust to the rigorous life of an activist. Many times, in the middle of a meeting, we would hear a car horn. The women would jump up and rush out to dine with their husbands in Cholan. Yet these sisters were patriotic. After participating in our mobilizing activities, they agreed to join the Association of Progressive Women. I will always remember older sister Han, a doctor, and older sister Queen Hoa, who later became Minister of Health for the Provisional Revolutionary Government, PRG, of the Republic of South Vietnam. When Queen Hoa left Saigon for the resistance base, the Saigon administration confiscated all her belongings and sentenced her to death in absentia. In 1949, Duy Lien and I received an introduction to a cell led by Nguyen Hu Tho. Students who had just finished school went to the offices of this very famous lawyer, who was among the 20th century's greatest Vietnamese intellectuals. Duy Lien and I arrived, all aflutter. We were completely out of our element. The office was elegant and luxurious, while the lawyer was tall and handsome. He smiled graciously as he welcomed us. From that point onward, my fate and my life were linked closely to the life of this man of great intellect, this best of comrades. Our cell also included older sister Tam Lu as cell secretary. An experienced revolutionary, she had taken part in the Southern Uprising of 1940. The General Secretary of the City Party Committee at that time was Comrade Nguyen Van Lin. Along with Nguyen Hu Tho, I must also speak of Dr. Pham Ngoc Thach, Nguyen Tan Phat, and the many other Southern intellectuals whom I knew during my years as an activist. For the most part, they were wealthy people of high social station, but when faced with the revolution and our country's huge needs, they discarded everything and threw themselves into the shared resistance struggle, contributing their extraordinary intelligence to the nation. To my thinking, the dominant characteristic of the Vietnamese intelligentsia at that time was the wealth of their patriotism. Indeed, the intelligentsia was the quintessence of patriotism. I have great respect and affection for those comrades. We soon saw that our undercover activism would be insufficient unless we expanded the movement. We needed to bring our people out into open struggle under many forms, both legal and illegal. Organizers formed many groups, such as the Association of Progressive Women, the Association to Assist Victims of the Tan Kiang Fire, plus organizations of workers, university students, high school students, etc. Every stratum of society had its public, legal organization. The body representing these organizations was the Coordinating Committee of Organizational Representatives, which was headed by Nguyen Hu Tho. At the end of 1949, the enemy arrested a number of students at Petrus KY School. A protest erupted at the school, demanding the arrested students' release. The enemy responded with a further terror of arrests. Police rounded up all students who had protested. On January 9, 1950, several thousand students from across the city marched toward the official residence of French-backed Governor Tran Van Hu in the Botanical Gardens on La Grandière Street, now Li Tu Trong Street. They held aloft banners with the slogan, "Free the arrested Petrus KY students." Many supporters joined their march. The students had selected representatives to meet Governor Tran Van Hu, but he closed his doors and refused to see any of them. At midday, the police arrived in dozens of vehicles with several hundred soldiers to repress the demonstration. The students tried to resist but couldn't. Tran Van On, a student leader, blocked the road so that other students could escape. The police beat Tran Van On with their cudgels and shot him dead when he tried to scramble over a hedge. Tran Van On fell backwards. News of the demonstration and of Tran Van On's martyrdom spread like flames throughout Saigon. Indignation erupted into anger. Tran Van On's death was the spark igniting a firestorm. On January 12, 1950, Tran Van On's funeral became a colossal demonstration drawing people from all classes in Saigon, Cho Lan. Many people came from My Tho province and even from Bac Lu and Can Tho provinces farther south in the Mekong Delta. The Coordinating Committee of Organizational Representatives with Nguyen Hu Tho as its head had sent many proposals to the Saigon administration, demanding that the authorities end their terror and release all the students and everyone they had arrested in connection with the demonstration. Open organizations and undercover organizations met frequently to plan their opposition to the enemy. Then we heard that on March 19, 1952, American ships, the command ship Stickwell and the destroyer Anderson, would land at Saigon. Here was public evidence of American intervention to assist the French colonizers, who were facing difficulties on every front. The Saigon Party Committee organized a working committee to direct widespread opposition to the French colonizers' invasion and the American imperialists' intervention. At the same time, we would oppose the enemy's repression and terror, which increased daily in the cities. I was appointed representative for women on the demonstration's organizing committee. We mobilized in preparation for a workers' strike and a huge demonstration on March 19. At 8:00 that morning, crowds gathered at Ton Tho Tuong School. Just as Nguyen Hu Tho and comrades from the Coordinating Committee of Organizational Representatives were arriving, the openly organized groups tossed flyers from the school's top-floor windows. The flyers, which demanded that the enemy cease its terror, fell like welcomed rain. Nguyen Hu Tho had not begun to speak when police vehicles arrived. People pushed out to fill the street and block the police, with everyone marching in the direction of the Saigon market. Nguyen Hu Tho and many famous Saigon intellectuals led the march, along with a French woman, who was married to Comrade Pham Hoi Thong. The comrades heading the trade union delegation stretched out the red banners they had prepared beforehand. Wherever the trade union leaders went, bystanders holding aloft red flags with gold stars surged into the street and followed like waves of water in a flood. Our flags flew, dignified and dauntless, right there in the middle of enemy-occupied Saigon. Many people could not restrain their tears. According to the organizing committee's plan, wings of demonstrators would approach the municipal theater from different directions and then pour out to the wharf, where the 2 American ships were due to dock. In fact, the 2 ships had already arrived but did not dare approach the wharf. Instead, they anchored at a distance. The demonstrators coming from Ton Tho Tuong formed the primary wing. I accompanied that group. We had divided the organizing committee, with each of us following a wing. However, we were undercover as leaders. Our small group Nam Su, Dui Lin, and myself was so engrossed in the momentum that we had a hard time sticking to discipline. At this point, we were still on Le Loi Street in front of the municipal theater. A huge American flag appeared from the second floor of the U.S. government's Saigon office. I had just arrived. I saw several young men climbing up onto each other's shoulders to snatch the flag. I looked around. I knew undercover secret police agents were nearby. I shouted, "Protect those brothers." The youths yanked the American flag free. The crowd tore it to pieces. The young men had just jumped down when secret police agents arrived to nab them. I did not have time to think. I knew only that if I did nothing, the French police would arrest the youths. I jumped in and grabbed the hand of the secret police unit's commander, twisting his wrist. This gave the youths just enough time to escape. The youths kept running while the police commander shook his wrist, recovering from shock. The youths ducked into the crowd, darting this way, that way until they disappeared. I realized I was also in danger. The crowd was seething. I darted into the throng where it was thickest. Our crowd pressed toward the town hall. Another clash with the police ensued. I never heard whether the French commander's wrist was injured, but the demonstrators did set his vehicle afire, turning it into a charred frame. We pushed onto the river, shouting, "Down with the invading French colonizers! Down with the intervening Americans!" The purpose of the demonstration was to show our flag and instill spirit for opposing the American imperialists' aid to the French colonizers. Faced with the advancing masses of people, the 2 American ships hastened to weigh anchor and steam away. Some people estimated that nearly 500,000 people had joined that demonstration, yet the population of Saigon was only 1 million. However, it did seem to me as if all the city's occupants were in the streets. The enemy administration remained paralyzed for hours. We said to each other, if only we had weapons, we could have seized political power. There are so many unforgettable anecdotes about that demonstration on March 19, 1950. As our wing moved from Ton Tho Tuong out toward Ben Ton Market, we met the train en route from Saigon to My Tho. The railway workers stopped the train, jumped down, and joined our march. In another wing, the police threw tear gas grenades. Many demonstrators fainted. Residents living on both sides of the street brought out pails of water and ice. They took the injured inside for first aid. Wherever the French arrested demonstration leaders, the throng would protect other activists so they could escape. After the police officers recovered, they began sweeps throughout the city to pursue us. First, they arrested Nguyen Hu Tho to answer for his crimes. However, the police could not intimidate him and the Coordinating Committee of Organizational Representatives, which he led. Nguyen Hu Tho exposed the enemy's cruelty. He said the people's indignation was legitimate and that the administration's repression and terror had forced the people to rise up in opposition. A few months later, the authorities exiled Nguyen Hu Tho to Lai Châu province in the far north. Other demonstrations burst forth in Saigon. In April 1950, the enemy burned a hamlet of thatch houses at Tan Kiang in the Ban County area of workers, housing that served as one of our undercover resistance bases in the inner city. The authorities wanted to drive the people into another area. Several hundred families lost their houses, possessions, and what little capital they had accumulated. The French repression had forced them to live on reed mats under the open sky. The Coordinating Committee of Organizational Representatives strongly condemned the enemy's scheme and demanded that the enemy assist the local people. The legally open trade unions organized drives to raise funds to help the victims. This was also an occasion to continue encouraging the masses of people to join the struggle. On May 12, 1950, the enemy arrested and murdered Tran Boi Ko, a female ethnic Chinese student. Comrade Lin and I were responsible for organizing in the ethnic Chinese community. We received an assignment to set up a meeting in Cho Lan to denounce this cruelty and call on the ethnic Chinese to join with ethnic Vietnamese in opposing the aggressors and in protecting our youth. Once again, I made a mistake. I did not follow strict discipline and allowed the police to learn my identity. The brothers and sisters had set a table alongside a crowded Cho Lan street. At precisely the predetermined time, a young ethnic Chinese man jumped onto the table to speak. I looked around and saw that no one was guarding him. I called on several people to surround him. He held forth for about 5 minutes before the police arrived. The police arrested several people on site. Nevertheless, the meeting created indispensable echoes. Other echoes from struggles outside the city reached the enemy's prisons. In July 1950, brothers and sisters incarcerated at the Saigon Interrogation Center staged a hunger strike to oppose the prison's harsh treatment and to support demands made by compatriots outside the prison. The resistance leaders asked me to organize a demonstration by families of prisoners held at the center and, particularly, to mobilize the sisters whose husbands were prisoners. The year 1950 was especially notable for the ebullience of the Saigon, Cho Lan movement. I cannot remember all the demonstrations that we organized. These actions led our revolutionary brothers and sisters to call us the demonstration advisors. Indeed, we were ardent. We threw ourselves into those demonstrations. At that time, we heard about preparations for a general, nationwide counter-offensive. This encouraged us to increase our actions. I was elected president of the City Women's Union and party general secretary for the Unit of Women for National Salvation. The responsibilities were exacting, while my family responsibilities also brought increased worries. 2 of my siblings had left for resistance zones, but I still had 3 younger siblings at home as well as my cousins. I had to stop by home frequently to tend to them. These demonstrations occurred as battlefields across the country were generating important changes. The autumn 1950 border campaign of the People's Army of Vietnam, PAVN, liberated 3 northern border provinces Sao Bang, Bac Can, and Lang Son. This inspired the movement of the people's opposition in Saigon, Cholan. The French added to their terror in Saigon. We activists received orders to conceal ourselves and protect our forces. This was the period when the police arrested the greatest number of activists in the inner city. I received orders to go out to the worksite for our most important comrades, such as Dr. Pham Ngoc Thach and architect Nguyen Tan Phat, in the administrative committee for the resistance. Previously, I had gone on assignments to the key resistance zone and had worked on the newspaper Chong Zam Lang, Oppose Aggression, even though I had no journalistic skills. Later, I went to another guerrilla zone, to Area 8, for meetings of the Women's Union of the South. There, I met revolutionary women leaders, including Moi Thap, for whom I later served as secretary, Tu Din, La Thi Rieng, Tam Ton, Moi Hu, and others. Each woman influenced me in her own way. Each one enlarged my vision and understanding. Each one helped me become even more determined. None of these women is still alive, but for me, their images live on in my memory. While in the guerrilla zone, I visited my father in Dong Thap Moi province. There, he served as head of the Southern Military Engineers. The party committee for the South called me to its office. For the first time, I met the high-level comrades who had come to southern Vietnam from the party central level in the Northern Liberated Zone. They included comrades Le Duan, Le Duc Tho, and Pham Hung. I had always thought these comrades would be humorless and even hardened, but I found them easygoing, friendly, and caring. I was pleased to meet them and to report on the pulse of the work we had done in the city. One of the comrades asked, "What's most interesting when you reorganizing in the city?" Without thinking, I answered, "The demonstrations." They all laughed. I was able to learn from the comrades, discussion and advice, but my deepest impression came from careful instructions and their confidence in the path I was taking. By the beginning of 1951, we needed to strengthen the opposition in the city through greater flexibility in our actions to avoid the enemy's scrutiny. I no longer worked with the women but had moved over to responsibility for an intelligence team composed of Aunt Dat, older brother Din, and myself. At the same time, I served as secretary of the party Inner City Committee for junior staff. Comrade Nguyen Kiem chaired the committee. The situation was tense, with more arrests of comrades, such as Nguyen Kiem, Don Van Bo, and others. I had been working on my new assignment for 3 months when, in April 1951, the secret police arrested me along with older brother Nguyen Tho Chan, Aunt Dat, and Dui Lien. They jailed us in Catanat police station. Dat had been working in the town hall. She slipped out with enemy documents and personnel records. The police suspected Dat and arrested her on her way home. The rest of us had been staying with Dat, using her as cover. Thus, the police arrested us as well. We were repeatedly tortured because the enemy viewed us as important cadres for the city party committee. From an informant, they knew that Comrade Nguyen Tho Chan had just returned from the party central level in the Northern Liberated Zone, and so they were especially ruthless when torturing him. As for myself, I was cruelly beaten without stopping because an earlier arrestee had broken under torture and given my name. First, they tortured with savage beatings, then by submerging me in water, then with electricity, then I wanted to die so they would finish. I was most worried about breaking under torture and giving names, leading the enemy to arrest others. I decided I would accept whatever the enemy said about me, but my one purpose was to say nothing else. After a time, the torturers saw they could not wrest any information from me. The documents they had collected provided evidence that I had worked as a spy. In the end, they concluded that I was a spy and should receive a heavy sentence. Catanat Detention Center was the heart of the secret police in Indochina. I witnessed with my own eyes evidence of the fiendish savagery of the colonized hirelings. Without regret, they beat us to make us confess. They did not care whether their victims were men or women, old or young. They would use depraved tricks to humiliate us women. I had never thought it possible that human beings could be so cruel in so many ways. Years later, I met a number of friends who had been arrested again during the time of the Americans and their puppets. Those sisters told me that the cruelty of the Americans and their lackeys was many, many times worse than our experience under the French. Those who experienced the imperialists' terrible prisons can nevertheless imagine in their own minds, eyes the pain we suffered. While in prison, I witnessed models of bravery by the revolutionary warriors who died without surrendering. When I was taken to the interrogation room, I saw several secret police using cudgels and whips to flog a youth, who was suspended upside down from the ceiling, his body covered with blood. The youth held to his goal of giving no information. From others, I learned that he had been assigned special tasks in the city. This staunch warrior, whose name I never learned, was beaten to death. I knew many other martyrs. We know there were countless other heroic martyrs, whose names we do not know. Catinat Detention Center was under the direction of Bazin, the notorious chief of the French secret police. This detention center, famous for its cruelty, was at the head of Catinat Street, later Tudu Street, Saigon, South's most luxurious street with many elegant, expensive shops and large hotels. Immediately in front of the Catinat Detention Center was Notre Dame Cathedral, the city's largest and most beautiful church. I do not understand what the French colonizers, to be more exact, the French secret police, were thinking when they chose that site for Catinat Detention Center. Late at night, we would return from the torture chamber to the special detention room. The ringing in our ears from the enemy's horrible whippings, beatings, dunkings, and electricity would be replaced by the vang-vang resounding echo of the Notre Dame bells, as if those bells wanted to lessen our pain. What an irony! After Catinat, they held me in Kai Wap prison for 3 years. During that time, our resistance underwent major changes. Nguyen Hu Tho returned from exile. He was once again the primary lawyer who would argue on our behalf. After several weeks in Saigon, he once again secured entry into Kai Wap prison to visit a client. He let us know about the political and military situation outside and brought us nutritious food and even cakes and candy. The victory at Dien Bien Phu created a huge embarrassment for the enemy's army and simultaneously created favorable conditions for us. After I had spent 3 years in prison, the enemy condemned me to 4 more years but with a suspended sentence. I learned that people in Paris had intervened to lighten my sentence. They had been acquainted with my grandfather in the Human Rights League while grandfather was an activist in Paris. I have only recently been able to verify this. One other detail is certain. Lawyer Nguyen Hu Tho used all his zeal to advocate for me and other comrades before the French court. Duy Lien, my close friend, also worked in every possible way for my early release. I had heard from comrades arrested before me that French prisons were schools for revolutionaries. This was certainly true for me. Political prisoners did not allow themselves to waste time. We organized study practice sessions in culture and politics. Many of the women were illiterate, but after a time, they learned to read and write. Most important of all, we learned from each other and matured in our struggle against the enemy by sharing our own experiences and those of the comrades who had gone before us. We organized sessions every day with balanced reports from Kai Wap Prison Radio. These contained news from inside the prison and from outside society, news of the struggle, and news of the victories of our army and people from across the country. We demanded improvements in the prison system and also organized actions in response to the resistance movement outside the prison walls. At times, we organized hunger strikes for 6 consecutive days. Imprisoned with us were resistance activists as well as criminals. After mixing with us, some criminals examined their mistakes and changed. A few of them later became serious participants in the resistance. I will never forget 2 events, which occurred while I was in prison. My 4th younger brother, Dong Hao, had been studying at Nguyen Van to school in Region 9. In 1952, the revolutionary leaders chose Hao to go out to the northern region and then on to study outside the country. Visitors to the prison needed special photo identification papers and could visit only every 2 weeks. In truth, I never thought that Hao would secretly change the photograph on his ID so that he could sneak in and see me before leaving. My family is like that. Our family and the homeland and the revolution were one and could not be split. Seeing my brother both delighted and worried me. We stared at each other for several minutes and spoke only a few words amidst the noise of the other prisoners and their visitors. Those few minutes will remain forever in both our memories. That night, I couldn't possibly sleep. I was so homesick. I longed for my father and my siblings. I heard only recently about the second event. My father was deeply sad when he learned of my arrest. After this news, his hair quite quickly turned white. I knew my father loved us deeply. He had always encouraged us to participate in the resistance, but my father also always worried about his children, particularly his 2 daughters. After my release from prison, I met my father again when he was preparing to go out to the north to join the Dien Bien Phu campaign. I was so distressed to find him much weaker than before. Upon my release from prison in April 1954, the higher level of the resistance wanted me to work in the guerrilla zone, but I was better suited to work in the inner city, where all my friends were active and where my youngest siblings were living. I asked for some time off and then to return to work. At the time of my release from prison, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu was approaching its climax. The French, nearing defeat, were increasing their terror in the southern region. I had just re-established contact with comrades in the resistance organizations when the police arrested me again because Elder Phan's temple remained a site the secret police scrutinized. This time, the colonial authorities arrested me as well as a cousin, who was at the house. After 2 months, they released us, since they had no evidence. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu ended with our victory on May 7, 1954, but the French war did not end until after the Geneva Agreement was signed on July 20, 1954. We celebrated the victory. Immediately thereafter, we received an order to organize the masses to welcome the agreement and demand its strict implementation. Lawyer Nguyen Hu Tho, Lawyer Trinh Dinh Thao, Professor Pham Hoi Thong, Professor Nguyen Van Duong, and other leaders organized the peace movement and the struggle to demand the agreement's implementation. Older sisters Tam Lu, Dui Lin, Hu Bich, and I took part. We organized many meetings to explain the agreement's points. On August 1, 1954, the Special Police savagely repressed a large meeting, which the trade union had organized. The police used not only beatings, whippings, and electricity but also shot directly into the crowd. Hu Bich, my close friend, was wounded. We found a doctor to care for her. For us, the ill intentions of the French after signing the agreement were clear right from the start. The ink on the agreement was not yet dry when the French tore up the document and threw away the scraps. The situation during the following days was chaotic. Our orders from above were to stay within legal limits in opposing the enemy. Then, shortly thereafter, the police arrested 3 key resistance leaders and sent them to prison in Hai Phong in the northern region. As for the rest of us, we were forced to withdraw under cover. In October 1954, Comrade Pham Hung called me to Region 9. The comrades there asked that I tie up my work and join the United Ceasefire delegation, which would be formed in Saigon and travel out to the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north. The work would be in the south and involve the ceasefire. They had chosen me because I was acquainted with the people and localities in Saigon. I requested 2 months to organize everything for my siblings, schooling and to take care of personal affairs. Comrade Pham Hung agreed. After I regrouped to the north with my 3 youngest siblings, I prepared to return to Saigon but then learned that the ceasefire delegation had to drop several people. The delegation would no longer include a woman. Instead, they assigned me to work at the Central Level Women's Union in Hanoi. This began a new season in my life as an activist, and it concluded my 9 years in the resistance against French colonialism, a time that had tested and strengthened me. I would like to say more about the story surrounding my legal case. In 1951, the French police arrested me and accused me of crimes against national security. Albert Sonnet of the Sûreté in Cochin, China, the southern region of Vietnam, signed a report, which was forwarded to the Sûreté for all of Indochina. The report noted that I would be sentenced to death or life imprisonment. This alarmed our Saigon, Cho Lon leaders, who assigned lawyer Nguyen Hu Tho to follow my case, persuade the judges, and defend me in court. During that period, I also heard that activists in France, who had been acquainted with Phan Chau Trinh, my maternal grandfather, had found a way to intervene and reduce my sentence. However, I didn't know who was involved or how they had intervened. Then in 2001, my older cousin, La Thi Kin, aka Phan Thi Minh, went to the Archives Nationales d'Outre-mer, the colonial archives, at Aix-en-Provence in southern France to research the 14 years our grandfather was in Paris and the relationship between grandfather Phan and Nguyen Thad Ton, aka Nguyen I Quoc, Ho Chi Minh. In the process of this research, she found several documents related to my case. Among these documents was a letter signed by Marius Moutet, the Minister of Colonies who had signed the modus vivendi with President Ho on September 14, 1946 on the occasion of the official visit to France by Uncle Ho as the President of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Marius Moutet wrote his letter regarding my case on May 15, 1952, when he was no longer a minister in the French government but, instead, a senator, that is, a member of the higher house in the French parliament. He sent the letter to M. Letourneau, Minister of Associated States for the French government. The letter said, "I have learned that a young woman, age 23, who goes by the name of Saur San, is held at Kai Hua Detention Center in Saigon. Her case is about to be settled with the death penalty. This young woman is the granddaughter of someone whom I knew, M. Phan Chau Trinh. Vietnamese in both French-affiliated Vietnam and also among the revolutionary Viet Minh regard Phan Chau Trinh as a patriotic scholar, as a hero of their people. I am not clear about the accusations against this woman, but please allow me to suggest that both moral and political factors may lead to serious, negative results if she is executed. Even though this case is in the Vietnamese court with a Vietnamese judge rendering judgment, people will say that this sentence was under French direction. It is my deep wish and hope that you will give this matter your greatest attention." Signed, Marius Moutet. In addition to this letter, there were several official dispatches from the Office of the Minister for Associated States sent to the High Commissioner for Indochina and the Secret Police in the southern region of Vietnam regarding my case. The roots and results of Mr. Moutet's intervention are unclear since we do not have all the relevant documents. Nevertheless, this leads me to return and speak about several other matters regarding my grandfather. Elder Phan Chau Trinh was among the scholars who took the initiative in the Dui Tan movement, which was a progressive social movement at the beginning of the 20th century. He was arrested in 1908 and accused as a rebel who was instigating trouble. The royal court sentenced him to death. The 1908 arrest of Phan Chau Trinh led to a strong emotional outpouring and public discussion in Hanoi among patriotic Vietnamese and also among progressive French. Ernest Bobet, a journalist and member of the French Human Rights League, Ligue des droits de l'homme, led the campaign in Hanoi to save Elder Phan. Marius Moutet and a number of others in the Human Rights League in France were also dedicated supporters of Elder Phan. With their intervention, Elder Phan escaped execution. After that, during 14 years of exile in France, Elder Phan Chau Trinh continued his activities and was able to secure support from many Vietnamese living overseas and from progressive French people. Among them, in particular, was French Commandant Jules Roux. Years later, during the four-party talks with the United States in Paris, I searched for the families of Jules Roux and other friends of my grandfather, but unfortunately I was never able to find anyone. Nevertheless, Elder Phan's reputation as a man with a patriotic spirit, a modernist will, and a strong moral presence throughout his life created continuing trust and love among his compatriots inside our country as well as sympathy and admiration among international friends, particularly in France. Those feelings were so enduring that perhaps they abrogated the death sentence against one of Elder Phan's grandchildren. Perhaps Elder Phan passed along his deeds-earned benediction to rescue us all. 5. A special front opposing the United States to save the nation. At the Central Level Women's Union in Hanoi, I worked as secretary to Me Moi Thap, the union's president. She was also the party general secretary of the Women's Mobilization Unit, a member of the party Central Committee, and a member of the National Assembly. At first, this work was difficult because I was more familiar with secret, illegal, local organizing. In Hanoi, everything was completely different because my work was open. My tasks involved concentrating on each step, organizing the work myself, which meant usually making my own decisions and taking personal responsibility for those decisions. I worked with state offices, the National Assembly, the ministries, and the labor unions. All these offices were comfortably open. I was not acquainted with any of this. The Saigon authorities had recently released me from prison, and my health was poor. Working in this new environment tested me, but it also provided new experiences and many additional lessons, which I learned quickly. I was fortunate, for my experiences during the years of struggle in Saigon had taught me to face every difficulty with a self-confident, unflinching approach. All of us working at the National Women's Union affectionately called me Moi Thap, 10th older sister. In truth, 10th older sister was about my mother's age, yet my relationship with Moi Thap was both that of a secretary with the top leader and yet also that of a family member. 10th older sister both guided and supported me. When my son was still only a few months old, she and I often had to work late into the evening, long after the office creche had closed. 10th older sister would bring my son into the office and look after him. Moi Thap passed away several decades ago, but memories of her will remain forever in my heart. Many sisters working in the National Women's Union office, such as Hoang Ti, Ha Tk, my friends Nhan, Phuong, Nhu, Tu, and others, left me with warm feelings I can never forget. One day in late 1954, a few months after I arrived in the north, Dr. Pham Ngoc Thach came to see me. I had met Dr. Thach while he was president of the Saigon, Cho Lon Resistance Administrative Committee. Dr. Thach said, "Uncle Ho wants to meet you." Dr. Thach had told President Ho Chi Minh that a granddaughter of Elder Phan Chau Trinh was working in Hanoi. Hearing this, Uncle said he wanted to meet her. I was very excited to receive an invitation to the presidential palace, where Ho Chi Minh worked. He lived nearby in a converted workers' shed. Uncle greeted me and said he had known my grandfather when they were both in Paris and that he regarded Phan Chau Trin as the older brother who had helped him. I also knew that my grandfather and elder Nguyen Sin Sac, Uncle Ho's father, had been scholarly colleagues and activists together during the early days of the 20th century. Later, I had many chances to meet Ho Chi Minh. Each time, I felt fortunate to receive Uncle Ho's attention, concern, and encouragement. From 1957 until 1959, I studied in the first long-term course on theory and debate at the Nguyen Ai Quoc Academy. For the most part, the students were officials who had had no opportunity to study during the resistance war against France. Like them, this was also my first chance to study theory systematically. I approached the course contents, which were new and intriguing, with great interest. At the same time, I was caring for my newborn son. Meanwhile, Kang was working for the military in the right bank region of the Red River not too far from Hanoi. He would return home to visit us every few weeks. He and I had endured years of long and difficult separation. We had so many questions we had never been able to discuss. Now, at last, we could once again share confidences. After I finished my studies at the party school, I returned to the Central Level Women's Union, where I was elected to its party commission, with responsibility for social welfare. Through this assignment, I visited many northern localities and acquired a greater understanding of ordinary people's difficulties. Of course, I concentrated on women, who were the country's main productive force in addition to caring for their families and their communities' welfare. During 1956 and 1957, the Saigon authorities intensified their terror, arresting those who had been active in the resistance during the French War. No one among our people wanted war to return. The party's central level urged us to stay firmly committed to political struggle. We brothers and sisters who had regrouped to the north were eagerly hoping for early elections to reunite our country so we could also return home and reunite with our families in the southern region. However, we have a saying, "Trees may wish for quiet, but their longing does not keep the wind from blowing." After 2 years, we were denied the elections as stipulated in the Geneva Agreement. Indeed, the enemy's oppression and terror grew crueler every day. We can reasonably call 1958 and 1959 the years of white terror. People in every area of the South seethed with vindictive hatred as the US-backed Saigon administration waged a one-sided war against our people. Before long, the party had to shift its directive from political struggle exclusively to political struggle coordinated with armed struggle. On December 20, 1960, we established the National Liberation Front (NLF) of South Vietnam. This news, like rain falling after a drought, satisfied the people's deep, expectant longing. The entire country burst forth with determination to fight the Americans. In the North, a movement boiled up among those of us Southerners who had regrouped to the North. We asked to return to the South in order to struggle directly alongside our compatriots. During those days, the chance to go to B was every person's greatest wish and highest honor. Sisters at the Central Level Women's Union prepared to leave on their march to the South. Older sisters La Donne and Phuong were both journalists, whose husbands had stayed behind in the South. They received first priority. Like them, I received ideological orientation from older sister Moi Thap in order to return to the South. Then, at the beginning of 1961, comrades from the Reunification Committee came to the Women's Union and asked to borrow me for 6 months to work for the NLF in foreign affairs. After the NLF's formation, the people's struggle in the South erupted with vigor. In 1960 and 1961, the general uprising exploded in Ben Tre province, spread quickly to neighboring Mai Tho, Tien Giang, and Dom Thap provinces, and then rippled across the entire South. We realized we needed to develop a diplomatic front synchronized with the political and military fronts. A part of me wavered when I first heard the news that I had been assigned to work in foreign affairs. It is true that I had skills in French, had been an activist in Saigon, and had worked directly with many different groups of people. However, except for part of my childhood in Cambodia, I had never left the country. Yet the South was my flesh and blood. I could not refuse any task. In the middle of 1961, I returned to the Reunification Committee, which assigned me to its Foreign Affairs section under Comrade Le Ton Tu, with Hoang Bich Sun, also known as Ho Lin, as Chief of Cabinet. I served as Deputy Department Head for Comrade Vo Dong Jiang, who, several months later, became Head of Department 1A, with responsibility for NLF people-to-people diplomacy. By this time, we had established people's mass organizations in the NLF. Using the NLF's newly formalized status, we sent delegations to participate in meetings organized by collegial international organizations. Our Liberation Youth of the South became a member organization of the World Federation of Democratic Youth, FMJD, Fédération Mondiale de la Jeunesse Démocratique. Our Union of Liberation Trade Unions joined the Federation of World Trade Unions, FSM, Fédération Syndicale Mondiale. And our Vietnamese Peace Committee took part in the Committee for World Peace, CPM, Comité de Paix Mondiale. At the end of 1961, Vietnam fielded its first delegations to international events for people's organizations. Older brother Nguyen Van Tam, nicknamed Moi Yu, literally, 10th gain. Because he was a little heavy, led a delegation to the World Congress of Trade Unions, while Nguyen Van Hue went to the World Peace Congress. Both organizations met in Moscow. In June 1962, I joined the World Congress of Youth, UIE, in Budapest and then, in July 1962, attended the World Congress of Democratic Youth in Leningrad along with poet Tan Hai and Dr. Nguyen Xuan Thuy. At that time, I was 37 and had to register my age as 32 in order to qualify as a youth. When I joined the Reunification Committee, we all changed our names in order to maintain secrecy. Nguyen Van Duc, one of the comrades leading the Reunification Committee, suggested I take the name of Binh since Binh means peace. Then, he said, whenever I went overseas, it would be easier to create sympathy and, besides, Binh was also an easy name for foreigners to say. At his suggestion, I changed my name from Yen Sa, my alias throughout the resistance war against France, to Nguyen Thi Binh. The first two international congresses I joined were in two socialist countries, the Soviet Union and Hungary, which supported us by covering all costs for travel, housing, and food. Thus, our conditions for social action were indeed favorable. For the first time, these conference participants met colleagues from the South, that is to say, they met real Viet Cong. Everyone was delighted to see us. We were showered with affection and admiration. "You Vietnamese are so small," they would say. "How can you fight the Americans so heroically?" Some participants were confused and said, "The United States is so rich. Why would the Americans invade Vietnam?" Our mission was to explain to our friends the meaning and the principled nature of our struggle. We always had two delegations at such international meetings. One came from the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the DRVN or North Vietnam, and the other from the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam, the NLF or Viet Cong. The conference presidium would always ask Vietnam to take the floor first. The DRVN delegation would then yield to the NLF delegation. Whenever we climbed on stage, the entire audience would stand, for our struggle had gained admiration from the world's peace-loving, progressive groups. We asserted that the people of South Vietnam had no alternative but to rise up against the invading enemy and no wish other than to live in peace and enjoy normal lives like everyone else. These words, which we conveyed with sincerity and simplicity, won the participants' hearts, minds, and empathy. Whenever I spoke, I was deeply moved, for the sentiments I expressed came from my heart. I saw clearly that I was trying to tell our friends from 5 continents about the profound aspiration of the millions of my compatriots suffering and dying at that very moment in an unbelievably arduous struggle. My 6 months, on loan,